Hi, everybody. This is Dan Stolbarger. Welcome to this week's KFIR Middle East update, the week of the 14th of May. Whew. This will be more of a lengthy update because of everything that's taken place in the Middle East, specifically in Israel, regarding the rockets and Jerusalem and Gaza, etc. At this point, over 1,600 rockets have been fired at Israel. The country's in chaos. People are living in bomb shelters, and riots are picking up in major cities with multiple casualties. It looks as if a ground operation into Gaza is inevitable. More than 400 people have been arrested for rioting related crimes, and this is in towns such as Jerusalem, Haifa, Tiberias, Lod, Bet Yam, Akko. And this is a clash between Arabs and Jews. Keep in mind, lurking in the shadows behind all of this is Iran. They're the ones that are supplying the rockets and fueling the violence in whatever way they possibly can. In Ashkelon, residents are encouraged to lock their doors, turn out their lights. There's a suspected infiltration of terrorists from Gaza into Ashkelon. It just was reported that 3 rockets were fired from Lebanon. Hezbollah, or Lebanese, have gone on record to say not from us, it's from a Palestinian enclave in Lebanon. Those rockets, were told, landed in the Med. But one has to wonder if Hezbollah is feeling left out of the party. So this is all what's taking place right now. Just a reminder as we make our way through, that's sort of our splash, our news bites. Make sure you grab the PDF PowerPoint, a lot more information, pictures, etc. Websites, holygroundexplorations.com. And, the question, I guess, has to be asked, what started all of this? And if you pull up that PDF, you're going to see on slide number 4, this is the Temple Mount. And this is a banner that's flying from the Temple Mount. What's informative about this is that these are not Jordanians who run the Temple Mount. These are not members of Fatah. You don't see Abbas there. This is Hamas. And what has transpired very simply is this. Elections, obviously I'm not talking about Israeli, I'm talking about Palestinian, postponed. Why? Keep in mind, Abbas is serving 17 years so far in his 4-year term. And anytime that there's a sense, as these elections come near, that the balance of power will be impacted, postponement. What took place here is that during the end of Ramadan, Fatah used this opportunity to falsely accuse Israel of whatever it may be. It's, as we've said so many times before, truth is not an issue here. But during the end of Ramadan, riots broke out between Arab and Jews. Arabs do not want Israelis on the Temple Mount, so the threat is that Israel's planning on taking the Temple Mount back. They're evicting people from East Jerusalem, etc., etc. And violence breaks out. Shootings take place, casualties take place, stabbings take place. And it's just the end of Ramadan, which just so happens to coincide with Jerusalem Day, which is sort of a parade of flags that are going to take people from through the Muslim quarter, Damascus Gate. I mean, it's just ripe for violence to break out. So this is what takes place. And again, then politically speaking, Abbas says, we are the guardians of Jerusalem, etc., elevating him in the political side of things. And so what does Hamas have to do? They're competing politically by attacking Israel. After Abbas succeeded in igniting this violence in Jerusalem, Hamas felt the need to, how do we catch up? We need to attack. And so that's when the rockets started flying. And now, as I mentioned before, we are over 1,600 rockets that have been launched. And let me say this, I held off as long as I could for this because there's things happening all the time, but I don't see an end in sight. I definitely don't think there's a ceasefire around the corner. I think we're looking at weeks. I think Israel, as we go through this, is going to do what they need to do at this particular time. So again, an update. Defense Minister Benny Gantz yesterday, and I realize this is all time sensitive, basically said, we are not ready for a ceasefire. There is currently no end date of this operation. Only when we achieve complete quiet can we talk about calm. And Gantz goes on, and I'm glad to hear this. He says, and please, we're not listening to any moral preaching from any organizations or institutions regarding our right and duty to protect the citizens of Israel. Once again, 1,600 rockets launched, people living in bomb shelters, casualties, deaths taking place. How many rockets would we accept from Canada? I live in northern Idaho. How many rockets would we accept coming over our border, hitting our cities? 10? 1? 1,600? Come on. So Gantz has gone on, again, the defense minister, saying significant attacks are planned. We've hit commanders, important Hamas infrastructure. We've seen high rises falling down, factories collapsing, tunnels being destroyed. There is a plan, and Israel will not take its pedal off the metal until they accomplish what they need to at this time. It's starting to change, but Israel loses the battle of public opinion. This is now being termed the Operation Guardian of the Walls. And again, the concept in these days is it's David versus Goliath. Unfortunately for Israel, David is no longer the little boy with the slingshot going up against the giant, David being the Israeli. No, now it's the poor Palestinians that are the little David. And it's easy for managed media to focus in, especially with veins of anti-Semitism running through. And so with all the images that are taking place, rioting, fires on the Temple Mount, it's starting to, the pendulum's starting to swing back, because now we're seeing hundreds of rockets being launched. And we're not just talking about in the Sinai or the Negev or the wilderness of Zin or the desert. We now have hundreds of rockets being launched into Tel Aviv. And if you're not familiar with Israel, that's like New York City, Haifa, Netanya, Ashkelon, Ashdod, and of course, Jerusalem. And so it's hard to ignore all of these rockets that are being fired. So public opinion is starting to swing back saying, this has got to stop. Make no mistake about it, it has been and it will always be about Jerusalem. The Hamas terror chief Ismail Haniyeh said in a speech on Tuesday that you need to be thankful for Hamas. We've created a new balance of power. We are the guardians of Jerusalem. Again, this is not just spoken to the world, but specifically to the Palestinians, specifically to Fatah. You can count on us. We'll defend you. And so what's taking place right now is Hamas is desperately wanting a ceasefire, and Israel will have none of it. So this is all now the war concerning public opinion. And if you haven't noticed, the U.S. has a new president, a new administration. I can't imagine what would be taking place right now under the Trump administration, but under the Biden administration, Israel is being challenged. Stop, pull back, remove. It's going to continue. Again, Biden just fumbled the ball when he was attempting to please everyone with his tepid responses to Middle East violence. The U.S. did block a Security Council statement criticizing both sides, but Biden told reporters just yesterday that he spoke to Netanyahu. He assured Netanyahu of his support. He made the statement saying that Israel has the right to defend itself, but just from today, our friend Amir Safate just indicated that the Pentagon spoke to the Israelis and basically said, remove the armed personnel. There are 120 armed personnel on the Gaza border. Remove them and send them home. I got a feeling Israel's turning a blind eye and a deaf ear to any exhortations, demands from the Biden administration. No big surprise here. ISIS has joined in, basically wanting to say, we are supportive of all this. Palestinians should wage a jihad, a holy war, kill as many Jews as possible. No big surprise there. And then, as I said, a lot of the violence that's frightening is what's taking place in some of these cities. Netanyahu just came out and said, this is war. Israelis are under massive attacks. Not only the rockets alone, but there are violent Arab rioters that are torching the cities, Israeli cities of Lod, of Ashkelon, and we just heard from our friend in Haifa that there are these public displays of violence, lynchings or attempted lynchings that are taking place, Arab against Jew. And this is going to take a long time to settle back down again. It's, according to Netanyahu, Israel is in a state of war at this particular time. A couple other things before we go. Not on the same level, but something you should be aware of. On this slide 12, we talk a lot about different forms of violence, terrorism. You might think of, well, what's the big deal about these little balloons that are going up and over? Look at this photo. At least 35 fires broke out in southern Israel on Sunday as terrorists from Gaza launched incendiary balloons. It's not a rocket, it's just a helium balloon, but attached to it is a fire starter. And as the winds of the Med blow these balloons over into Israel, as they fall to the ground, they set these fires. And so, again, what's Israel to do? These are just balloons. And Israel's always going to be accused of unfairly retaliating against the poor Palestinians. What would we do? Well, one last thing, tragically, and I include this because we've been there. We've walked these streets. We've seen the shrapnel. We've seen the effects of these rockets. And today, rockets sounded in Sderot. You'll see in the pictures here that a rocket fired by Hamas into the city of Sderot hit a building, killing a 5-year-old, seriously injuring his mother. Sister was treated for injuries. Cousin was also seriously injured. Despite all the success of Iron Dome, there were direct hits registered in several locations around the country, including Sderot. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Remember the promises of Genesis 12. I'll bless those that bless thee. I'll curse those who curse thee. Understand what's taken place is a prelude, horizon, looking out at the end of days coming our direction. No doubt, Israel at some point in time will have to stand alone. Battle of Ezekiel 38 and 39 on the horizon. But as I tell my friends, my Israeli friends in Israel, as I understand what the scriptures say, I understand that you might need or have to stand alone. But I pray to my Lord that it's not on my watch. Watchmen on the walls praying for the peace of Jerusalem, praying that Israeli eyes would be open to receive Yeshua, Jesus, as the Messiah. So that's the report for this week. And I pray that you take it to heart and be an advocate, stand in the gap, and a prayer warrior for Israel. Shalom.